after the meeting, if you want to go and help yourself over there and contribute, that would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I don't know how we're going on at the moment. Oh, that looks promising. That looks promising. I shall now, it's my pleasure to introduce Helen Mackinnon. She's a music graduate, has worked in the charities sector in Perth for nearly 20 years, across marketing, fundraising and business development roles, and as Chief Executive of Perth and Kinross Associations of Voluntary Service until 2015. Helen then moved back to her roots in the arts, starting a professional career as a composer of music. Alongside composing, Helen is in her 4th year as festival administrator for the charity Perth Festival of the Arts. That was the stuff she gave me. What she didn't tell me, that she holds a first-class honours in music from Glasgow, won a composition prize at Florence Choir Festival, and has works performed by and recorded with the RSNO. So she's one of our most promising contemporary Scottish composers. It's my great pleasure to introduce her.
Thank you very much, Robert. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. As Robert said, my name's Helen and I'm the Festival Administrator with the local charity Perth Festival of the Arts. Sorry, I'll come out here so people around here can see me. We are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. Is that okay? Do I need to do anything differently to stop it? Some feedback there? Okay, I'll keep going just now. Incredibly grateful for the invitation to come and speak with you today about the festival, and it's very timely because as we move towards May, we're actually going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the festival this year. So I'm keen to be out and about speaking to people about what we do. Thank you. Thank you so much as well. I'd just say to the gentlemen and the technical team who've been working, I know, very hard to try and get the slides and everything ready this morning. So at least you can now see some pictures and not just listen to me for the next wee while. So the plan today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the festival, what it is and does today, and then I'm going to jump back and talk about its inception 50 years ago, how it developed, and just some details of its roots. I'll share some anecdotes along the way, and then we're going to finish up with roots. I'll share some anecdotes along the way, and then we're going to finish up with a bit of an insight into this year's festival programme, which is quite hot off the press, and some of it not yet announced, so just keep it within these 4 walls. So we are one of the longest standing, continuously running arts festivals in Scotland. We nearly had it not been for COVID, 50 consecutive years under our belt, but sadly in May 2020 we had to miss a year, unsurprisingly. The festival was first established in 1972, so as I mentioned, we're celebrating the big 5-0 this year. We really exist to supply the city of Perth with a high-quality arts festival experience every year. And we run for 10 to 12 days each May in venues around the city. So our core of the festival is in Perth Concert Hall and Perth Theatre and St John's Kirk. So almost every day there's events taking place there. But we also have concerts in this lovely church, St Matthew's, and St Ninian's Cathedral, and other spaces in Perth. So very much city centre based, but try and spread around the city to create a bit of a festival buzz during those 10 or 12 days. We cover all the arts. So you'll hear in a moment that we're very much had a classical music and an opera core right from the inception. But over the past 50 years, we have developed to be extremely diverse. So we have literature events, as well as opera, classical music, rock, pop, jazz music, drama, and we have a visual arts exhibition as well. And I'm sure there's genres I've missed. So it's very much, we have a bit of an aim of something for everyone. If you are somebody who enjoys the arts, the chances are there's something in the festival that might interest you. Over the course of the 10 or 12 days, we have about usually 30 events in a normal year. This year, we're I think peaking at about 40 events, so it's a very full and busy time, and busy time for the city. We have around 12 to 13,000 attendees at the festival over the course of the 10 days. We're a registered charity, registered with Oscar, and we're run by a volunteer committee. And one of the interesting things about the festival, I think, is that since it started really, and continuing today, we don't have an artistic director. So I'm the only staff member of the festival, I'm festival administrator, and which really means a project management role. But right from the start, the committee wanted to take on the role of programming itself, and that has maintained today. So what that means is the committee as jointly decide and agree what they're going to programme, and there's not one individual person who does that. And it was interesting, when I first started with the festival, so I just started in 2018, so my first live festival was 2019, and I was interviewed by Keith Bruce, who is a critic, music critic, and was working for the Herald. And he asked me the question about this model of not having an artistic director, and I think he was perhaps was he suggesting that it was maybe a bit traditional, maybe a bit outdated, but I quite firmly defended the position, because I think what it leads to is a number of different people with very different artistic tastes and interests and knowledge and expertise coming together and then shaping a programme that we hope will deliver the best for everyone. So it might be seen as perhaps an outdated model, but I think it's a model that still works and very much goes back to our roots. And just again, as a wee bit of background, we're part funded by trusts and foundations. We have support of local businesses and our festival friends, who are wonderful individuals who support us during the year. And this support is really critical to our viability as a festival. You can imagine running a professional arts festival of this scale is not insignificant in terms of cost. So the support from funders, it allows us really to A, programme a number of free events, B, put on things for particularly schools and young people, and then lastly, it allows us to keep our ticket prices as low as we can while aiming to break even overall for the festival. So we aim to really bring high quality arts experiences to people of all ages and backgrounds, and the aim really is to inspire people to take an interest in the arts, to experience perhaps artistic genres that they've never experienced before. Certainly since I joined the festival, I've gone to concerts that I would probably never have gone to before, and I've absolutely loved them, and it's completely opened my mind really about just the range and breadth of arts that are out there. We also make very special steps to work with and encourage young people into the arts. The arts are such an important part of a young person's development, from self-confidence, self-esteem, team building, self-expression, emotional development, and not to mention all the technical skills that you learn. So we have, right from the inception of the festival, we've had a really strong programme of working with young people, particularly young musicians, and that is a big part of our aims as well. And finally, quality is very important to us. So apart from our work with young people who are obviously still developing as performers, we work almost exclusively with professional artists. So we aim to bring artists to Perth who perhaps don't come at other times of year, or those who bring maybe a bespoke production or something that's a bit different. So we try to keep it as different and fresh and as complementary to other things that are happening in Perth, because as you know, if you're an attender of concerts in Perth, there's so much to choose from now. We're very, very fortunate. We have a real breadth and volume of different arts events happening in the city throughout the year. So how did it all begin? Well, Conrad Wilson, who some of you may know, was a music critic initially for the Scotsman and then the Herald, and Conrad was a frequenter of music concerts in Perth. So this was going back to the late 60s. And he wrote a festival anniversary book, actually 10 years ago, celebrating our 40th anniversary. And he set out, explains he set out a challenge at some point in the late 60s, declaring that Perth was an ideal festival city without a festival. And essentially a number of local individuals with a passion for an interest in the arts from across a number of different business sectors started to, I guess, rise to this challenge and started to bring together plans for the festivals, the first festival. And you can see here in this picture here, this is deemed the first committee photo. This is published by the PA in 1973. I won't go through all the names, but there'll certainly be people that you recognise, Bruce Ingalls, Alistair Cairncross, John Henry, obviously Ian Halliday, who passed away very recently, the Countess of Mansfield, so a number of different very familiar and well-known local faces. And this committee really were, they were the roots of the festival to get the ideas moving. And there was a local music teacher, John McLeod, who started to prepare some artistic submissions. So this was late 60s, and by into 1971, the PA had published a blueprint of the first Perth Festival of the Arts, and the council, the Perth Town Council at that time, added its support to the festival. And interestingly, again, from the outset, the committee had rejected this notion of having an artistic director. They wanted the programming to really sit in the hands of the committee. So the first festival launched in April 1972, and it ran for 8 days in the city. So it opened with a concert. This is with Perth Symphony Orchestra, who you can see rehearsing here with John McLeod. They performed with Perth Choral Society, performing Zadok the Priest and a number of different popular operatic excerpts. And Scottish opera were a really important part of the festival at that time, and particularly in the early years. And they performed over 4 nights in the first festival. Just to give you a couple of examples, Mozart's Così fan tutte and Britten's A Midsummer's Night's Dream, which is, you can see one of the cast here. At this time, the festival also introduced what would become a continual series of, they called them celebrity piano recitals. So they had pianist John Ogden initially, and that went on to feature a number of pianists over the years. And then they closed with a festival prom with Alexander Gibson and the Scottish National Orchestra in Perth City Hall. And tickets were a staggering 25 pence. if only tickets were that cheap these days. From there, the festival moved from April to May. It was hoping for really, I think, better weather and tourism at that point. So moved by a month, and it's been in May ever since. And throughout the 70s, the festival started then to move into other venues. So we had concerts in the Long Gallery at Scone Palace, out at Battleby House at Red Gorton, and we had lunchtime concerts in St John's Kirk that have developed but very much continue today as part of the festival. I think just a wee story to share. I thought was very interesting. I read this in the history of the book that Conrad Wilson had written. So the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra made its Perth Festival debut in 1973, and if you look over old programmes, the BBC SSO appeared a number of times. But Conrad tells the story of, it was actually jumping forward to 1980, they were due to perform at Perth City Hall in the festival, but there had been a sudden industrial dispute that had broken out with the BBC and I guess its players. So Conrad explains that he had gone to Perth to review the concert, and he arrives in Perth outside the City Hall to find the City Hall shut, and as he describes it, tension in the air. So he says the head of BBC Music is standing outside, and the players and the management appear to be at a standoff position. It all sounds very dramatic. So to break the deadlock, he explains the festival had to engage each individual player individually rather than as a collective orchestra without the BBC name, and that was a way of getting around the situation and allowing the concert to go on. So what a lot of stress it must have been. I think of poor committee members at that time, because that sounds like an incredible amount of stress and hard work just before a concert. But the show went on, and I guess this is just one of the many, many over the years behind-the-scenes stories that can happen right at the last minute on the day of a concert in a festival with many moving parts. And it's the kind of things usually the audiences never know about, because it just happens quite silently in the background. So another important feature of the festival, continuing today, but certainly since its inception, is visual art. So those of you might remember back in the 70s, Perth Museum and Art Gallery certainly hosted a number of exhibitions, including a Turner exhibition in 1974. And then you can see here on the left-hand side, this is a Tay Street Art Mart. So this was a commercial development that happened again in the 70s and developed. And it was showcasing the art of contemporary artists, and that then became Art in the Riverside. And I'm sure anybody who's lived in Perth will remember these days. I remember certainly, I think I was probably a teenager, walking up and down Tay Street and exploring the art. And today that continues in the form of Arty, which some of you may recognise. Arty takes place at the first 4 days of the festival. It's run by Hugh Goring, who's on our committee, but is the owner of Frames Gallery in Perth. And it's one of the largest exhibitions of contemporary Scottish art that takes place in Scotland every year. They have the work of about 80 artists and several hundred works of art for sale. So if you enjoy browsing visual art, and there's not just paintings, there's sculptures and other things as well, I would certainly recommend it. It's a free event and it's open up until concert starts, so it's quite nice if you're going to a festival concert, you can take in the art as well. So I'm just picking some highlights now, rather than going through every year. We don't have enough time for that. But as we're moving from the 70s into the 80s, I mean, it's incredible looking back at festival programmes. I've been doing that in preparation for the 50th anniversary. And we've had some incredible orchestras and a wonderful range of orchestras. So we could see in this period, we had a lot of visiting British orchestras as well as the Scottish ones. So some examples were the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, the Northern Sinfonia of Newcastle, the Halley Orchestra, and then the Royal Philharmonic. So this is a black and white picture from 1980, and this was in the City Hall. It was lovely to find that one. I have a lovely personal memory of this period. I was, I think, about 8 years old, so this was about 1988, and I had just started learning the violin. I went to the Caledonian Road Music School in Perth to learn, and we all had the opportunity to come along to see a professional orchestra play in the festival. And I think it must have been a children's concert because we were able to listen to the orchestra, and then I remember being able to get my violin out in the stalls of the City Hall and play along a bit with the orchestra. And I remember this was my first ever experience of a professional orchestra, and I remember the excitement and the buzz of just hearing these amazing players, and it's gone on to have a lifelong influence in music. And it's very much part of this ethos of the festival is exposing young people to really high quality musical experiences at a young age. And there's so many people since starting at the festival that I've met who keep sharing this memory, and they might have been in their 20s, 30s, 40s, but they remember playing in the festival as a child. So really lots of fond memories, I think, from this period, certainly for me and people of my age. So moving through the 80s, there was a lot happening at the festival. We were programming different chamber groups, people like the National Ensemble, we had Polish Chamber Orchestra. But one particular individual that I wanted to mention was John Curry, who was pictured here. So John was director of the SNO Chorus and the Edinburgh Festival Chorus, and a long-standing relationship was established between John Curry and the festival. Now, what I don't know, I'm sure I'll probably speak to Sue afterwards, I'd love to understand how that developed and where that kind of history came from a bit more, because it went on for so many years and was a very close relationship. So the John Curry Singers, they're a 16-piece choir, they started to perform at St John's Kirk, and that continued to feature in the festival, as well as the SNO Chorus under Curry's direction. So that was from the late 70s, but by the mid-80s, the festival had essentially established its own opera productions. Perth Festival Opera, it was called, of which recruited singers then directly and put on productions under John Curry's direction. So this was quite a new and I think completely unique era really in the festival's history, where it was actually producing with the support of a director. So in 1986 it debuted with The Marriage of Figaro, with a Perth Festival Opera for the first time. And tickets at this point were currently £8, so you can see how the economy is changing. And this was a really fruitful relationship that lasted with the festival and John Curry, I think until about 2000, when it was decided that, I think partly because of the cost, it needed to perhaps give way just to let the festival develop in other areas. I want to say a little bit about our Music on a Saturday Morning concerts, which also developed a long time ago. But each festival, we programme one concert that includes a young person who is at professional level. They're perhaps just finishing off their studies, or they've just graduated in music, and they're going to be working as a professional performer. And over the years, we've had so many young professionals from Perth who have gone on to have careers in music. And I've just pictured a few there. It's Alistair Beatson, Rowan Hellier, who's a mezzo, and Colleen Nichol, who's a soprano. And we've had so many over the years. I think in recent years we had Hannah Fisher, the traditional fiddle player, Katie Coventry, opera singer, Helen was a saxophonist. So it's very much about giving young people just that platform in a festival at an important stage of their careers. And that usually takes place in St John's Kirk. Another highlight for me, and I say this kind of wearing my composer hat, is that we had in 1987 a whole week of the festival dedicated to the composer Malcolm Arnold, which I thought was a really, again, unique and interesting feature. I think over the period of the festival, we featured 8 of Malcolm Arnold's lesser-known works. We had talks by the composer, I think work with a youth choir and other different events. And Conrad Wilson writes about it as being one of the great events in the festival's history. So again, I wasn't around at that time, but I would love to find out, just from people who were, a little bit more about that week and that experience of having Malcolm Arnold so fully involved in the festival. And again, Sue, I'm looking at you. I'm sure there's lots of memories to share from that period. Then as we get into the 80s and 90s, we're starting to attract some really significant European orchestras. I was going through a programme the other day and I think it was at least 3 international orchestras that were on the billing, which I just think is quite amazing in terms of the programming potential that the festival had. So we had people like the Finnish Radio Symphony Orchestra, the East Berlin Symphony Orchestra, Moscow State Orchestra, and then an orchestra from Budapest as well, the symphony. Pictured here is the Dresden Philharmonic. Many of you, if you've been to the festival in recent years, will know we've had a lot of Russian orchestras. This year we have the Russian Philharmonic of Novosibirsk, they're performing with Pavel Kolesnikov, who's a young pianist, and they're performing Grieg's Piano Concerto, so that's going to be, I think, quite a treat. We're really lucky, I think, in Perth that the international orchestras have Perth on the map as a place to go. Usually in May, the orchestra maybe will come to us and they might do the Usher Hall, but it's lovely that we are on the radar, I think, of some of these orchestras throughout the year. And if you haven't seen a Russian orchestra, I would thoroughly recommend it because they have such character and power in their playing, particularly if it's Russian repertoire. It's very exciting. Now, we've kind of moved through 25 years of the festival, and we're moving into a very important era, and this is the appointment of the first festival administrator, by the way of Sandra Ralston. So you might recognise Sandra. She's front row, middle there. She's a very well-known face in Perth because she arrived in 1997 and she worked for the festival for an incredible 22 years, which is an amazing length of service to have delivered 22 festivals. Sandra, like me, is self-employed. So our role is very much one of project management, I would say. What we do is, I'll give you an insight into how the role works, but we very much work on a cyclical basis. So after we finish one festival, we have a wee bit of a breather over the summer, but then by the autumn, we're into a period of programming. So what happens is myself and our committee, we all go out to shows and events, and particularly Edinburgh International Festival and the Fringe. So we're visiting really over the summer other things that are happening. We're looking for ideas, we're reviewing artists, we're reading reviews online, and we're speaking to agents, we're trying to find out what's touring. So it's very much this period of eyes and ears open and looking at possibilities for Perth. And then after that, we're starting to form a shape of a programme, probably by the early autumn. And then I get into a period of fundraising, so a good 3 or 4 months of writing lots of grant applications. And then we tend to programme really as funding comes in, so we're able to build the programme up over the next few months. And then as we reach this stage in February, we're just getting to the stage where we have our programme in place, we're finalising it, and then from March until May, it's very much a period of marketing and sales. So it's a very, as you can see, it's a very diverse job, and it's basically involves doing whatever needs done and different things at different times of year. We're very, very fortunate that by the time we get to delivering the festival, I have different pairs of hands to help, thankfully. So the committee are very involved in terms of being on site during events, but we work with the teams at the venues we're working with. So whether it's St John's Kirk or Horsecross with the Concert Hall and Theatre, we have obviously their staff helping with production and ticketing and other things. So we certainly couldn't deliver it as a one-man job, that's for sure. So Sandra stayed with the festival until 2018, until at which point I joined her as successor. I think it's fair to say that Sandra, breathed again some new life into the festival. You can see how it was starting to change. I'm sure partly because of her influence. We had a core of classical music, spoken word and visual art, and opera, but we started to really expand into satellite events, jazz, rock, comedy, all of which continue as a feature of the festival today. So in 1998, Jools Holland arrived, our festival favourite, with his Rhythm and Blues Orchestra. Jools, as you know, is a legendary figure in music. He's a multi-platinum recording artist, a TV presenter, and had an amazing pool in terms of a big name coming to Perth. And Jools is one of the few artists that we tend to programme year upon year. And the reason we do that is because A, he puts on such a great show. It's a wonderful night, he brings special guests. And secondly, audiences really enjoy it and they love it. And it's one of always the very first show to sell out every year. So I think as long as audiences are continuing to enjoy it, we'll keep having that relationship with Jools. Also, just a wee thing to mention, I don't have a photo for this one, but again, as a composer, I thought it was quite interesting. In 1999, we commissioned a new piece of orchestral music, which is a violin concerto by the Scottish composer Edward Maguire, and it was performed at the festival by the violinist Cleo Gould and the RSNO. And again, this got me quite excited as a composer, because when I first started, Sandra handed over a million boxes of files for me as administrator, and I was just taking all my time and working through them. And I found this original score that had been written by Eddie Maguire. So that was quite exciting for me to look at. I actually did my dissertation on Eddie when I was at university. So that has pride of place at home at the moment. It's lovely to be able to see that. But it was nice, again, just to get this feel of the festival commissioning and investing in new works. It'd obviously done it in the past with its own productions, and it was nice to see that it's also about generating music, new music. I want to say a little bit about English touring opera. So around 2000, an important new relationship emerged for the festival, and this was with ETO. So ETO don't regularly perform in Scotland, so it was a treat for the festival to work with them, really as sometimes their only Scottish concert. In 2001, they brought the Magic Flute, which was their first one with us, and this was, I think their last one was Verdi's Macbeth in 2019. This is pictured here, 2018, The Marriage of Figaro, which is a lovely picture. And then a slightly earlier one, which was Barber of Seville. It's interesting, one of the things, so in 2020, we'd obviously, just before COVID hit, I'll talk about that in a minute, we just published our programme for the festival, and it didn't include ETO. And I don't think I've had so many inquiries about one thing, but a lot of people who are very supportive of the festival had picked up on there's no ETO in the programme, where have they gone? And it's one of the challenges that I guess we do have as a festival. So ETO, because they are Arts Council funded in England, was not able to subsidise Scottish performances. So it meant that we were increasingly bearing the full front of the cost. And while their productions are first class and they're wonderful, we're getting to a point where it was really just too expensive for us in terms of keeping our ticket price accessible for Perth. And also the opera audiences were starting to decline slightly, so we had to make quite a difficult decision that we were in a position really financially to keep taking ETO on at this time. We hope very much it's a relationship we can rebuild in the future. But what we have been doing over the past really 3 or 4 years is warming up again that relationship with Scottish Opera, which we had right at the very start of the festival. So a wee announcement is that, so this is again just between these 4 walls because it won't be officially announced for another month, but we are actually doing an opening gala concert with Scottish Opera this year on the kind of first big concert of the festival. So really looking forward to bringing that together to celebrate the 50th. Now, as we get into the early 2000s by now, a new concert hall for Perth is on the card. So this is a bit of an exciting time for the festival. Building commenced in 2003 and the concert hall opened in 2006. So what it meant for us is we were now in our final era of concerts really in the City Hall, which had been our home for 3 decades. And at that time, it's interesting looking back at programmes, the festival was attracting some huge names in classical music. It was a time when, this concert season was really booming and Perth was enjoying some really top billing names. So I've just brought a couple up here. We had Leslie Garrett, who's performed at the festival a couple of times, Julian Lloyd-Webber, and Dame Kiri to Kanawa, who gave our final festival performance in Perth City Hall in 2005 with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. And this was also about a time when literature started to blossom at the festival. So we had Ian Rankin, Scottish author, and poetry nights as well, including a 3-day celebration with William Souter, with the work of William Souter. So now we're into the new era, really, which was a Perth Concert Hall, a state-of-the-art auditorium for Perth. And how blessed really are we to have this facility in Perth? And our first concert there was with the Budapest Symphony Orchestra in 2006. And again, with the hall came an opportunity to continue to attract some really big names across different genres. So we had Bryn Terfel, the great bass baritone, in 2007. And then Van Morrison attracted a sellout crowd, a very big concert for Perth in 2013. Again, another wee anecdote, Van Morrison is I think, probably quite publicly known for being a bit of a character, if I could call it that way. And the story, so I think Sandra has a few stories about his visit, but the one I'll share is that he was apparently flying into Dundee, I think via private plane, to do the show and flying back out. And Sandra had told me that I think there had been an issue with the opening hours of the airport. So Sandra had somehow managed to convince Dundee Airport to stay open to let this plane happening. I thought, gosh, of all the tasks you think you have to do as an administrator, asking an airport to stay open is probably not one of them. But so good persuasive skills, I think, to pull that one off. But again, just another behind-the-scenes thing that allowed the concert to happen. Moving on, a couple of wonderful violinist, Nicola Benedetti, who performed in 2017, and she performed last year. I'll tell you in a moment about our online festival, but she performed in our online festival with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. And then we had Nigel Kennedy in 2018. Some of you may remember that quite interesting concert, shall I say. Nigel was, again, a character. We all know he's a character. And he was a bit too casual, shall we say, in coming on stage. So I think after about 15 minutes, he arrived to the tune of the crowd starting to hum, "Why Are We Waiting?" So it started, you could just feel the tension in the air. The crowd was starting to turn. I guess it's one of the really interesting parts of being, I think, for me, the festival administrator. And Sandra will have so many more stories to share, but just the characters that you meet and the personalities in some of the artists. What I was struck with in my first year was really the professionalism that these artists bring to the job. And just to share one example with you, we had John Simpson, the international correspondent, who was coming along to speak about his work and his life and his book. And he was due to arrive at the theatre a couple of hours before the show commenced. And he had given me a ring on the phone, maybe about 3 hours before, to say, "Helen, my train's delayed, so I think it's going to be okay. They've got a diversion. I'm on another train, but it's going to be really tight. I might get in about 15 minutes before the show commences." So I said, "Okay, well, we can work with 15 minutes." So John continued to go on the train, and I was just trying to keep my cool. We had a very busy theatre. I think it was one of our nearly sold out events. So at this point, it was about 10 to 3. I had cancelled the taxi from the train station because I didn't want to risk any delays. So I got my other half, reliable, to go and pick up John. And then, so the car pulled up, and thankfully my nerves subsided. But it was about 5 to 3, and John said to me, he says, because we're walking into the theatre, he says, "Helen, can you give me an idea of what time it is now?" I said, "Well, it's 5 to 3, so you're on in exactly 5 minutes, John." And he just looked at me, cool as a cucumber, and said, "Oh, that's fine, time for a wee cup of tea." Just no panic whatsoever. It was amazing. And he just went on and gave a great talk. And it is one of the things that we see, really, is just, that they're just so professional, really, in the way that so many of the artists perform at the festival. And then we're really into the concert hall era. We're starting to be much more diverse. So pictured here, Ruby Wax, the Proclaimers, Marcus Brigstock, but really comedy and rock concerts started to prevail, alongside, obviously, the classical core that we have. And we've had some great artists in terms of rock concerts, particularly for a younger audience. So Katie Tunstall, Teenage Fan Club, The View, Calvin Harris, and then in my year in 2019, Lewis Capaldi, some of you may know, he's a Scottish musician who made some headlines by going straight in at #1 with his first album, and we were very lucky to get him. We kind of keep our eye to see who's up and coming, and we had asked him just at the right time, and if we'd waited, I think, a month later, we wouldn't have got him, because Perth was the last, I would say, medium-sized concert hall that Lewis played. He went on to play much bigger things after that. And it sold out within 4 minutes of being on general sale. So we were delighted because it brought a different demographic to the festival entirely. You know, the concert hall was packed with 15, 16-year-olds, and that was what we really wanted, was just kind of bring that diversity of age into the festival. One thing that really struck me again just about that concert was the pressures that young artists are actually under with some of their schedules and diaries. So I remember it was a Saturday, and Lewis, I think, he was due to go on stage at 8. He was due to arrive with us a bit before for sound checks, etc. And it was, I think, mid-afternoon. And one of my committee members had been at home and had turned on the TV, and I'm not sure exactly what football match it was. It was a big final of something in Wembley. And who was standing live in the middle of the pitch singing? But Lewis Capaldi. Of course, my committee member phoned immediately just to say, he's definitely still coming to us tonight, because he's currently in Wembley singing. And that's just indicative, really, of the schedules that some of these young artists have. It's really, I really take my hat off to them, because, you know, to his credit, he'd obviously had a very busy day, flew right up here, and then on stage to give a concert. So take my hat off to them. Now, before I get into 21, what happened after that? Obviously, along came COVID. So none of us were prepared, obviously, for what 2020 would bring. And our festival, 2020 festival, had been on sale just 1 week, in fact, probably less than a week, when essentially we had to make the decision to cancel and really tear it to the ground over 48 hours. So I suppose we all went on to understand the the severity of COVID, and it was inevitable that all this had to be done. But at the time, it was just really early March when COVID was just emerging, and none of us really knew what was happening. And it was an inevitable and a necessary decision, but certainly for those involved, it was probably the most soul-destroying 40 hours of my life, because you'd spent 12 months of your life really building up this programme, and then you had to take it down. But we got there, and we were so fortunate that we navigated a safe passage through what could have been actually a crippling year for the festival, because we were at a stage where we had contracts with every single artist. But we have a wonderful committee who are so dedicated, not just throughout the year, but particularly around this period. They brought their skills and their expertise and knowledge to help me navigate, that first critical few days really of working through so many contractual issues. And we also had wonderful support of our funders and local businesses, many of whom said, look, we know you have costs, keep your funding and let that help you. And I particularly mention actually the local businesses who support us, because many of them are not fully up and running yet. Staff have been furloughed, some have had to downsize, some their doors haven't opened yet, but they continued to just let us keep their sponsorship. They weren't getting their usual benefits in return, and we're really grateful for that support, because it really helped us through what could have been a pretty devastating year. The other thing that I just wanted to mention actually about that period is my reflection is that relationships changed, I think, with the challenges of COVID. So often I find some of the agency we work with, the relationships can be quite contractual, they're quite formal and contractual. Certainly when in some of the genres that we work in. But when COVID hit, all that changed. We all had to pick up the phone and had normal, honest conversation with each other to try and work through the challenges that we were both facing. And we've come out the other side of that with those relationships maintained. So it's very different now. It's a kind of a nicer part of the job for me. Sometimes it can be a bit more difficult dealing with agents, but now we're more familiar. We're just able to talk in a different way. And I would see that as a big positive of the past few years. I feel like relationships have deepened, and I hope that applies to other sectors as well. So just a quick mention of 2021, because it was a festival year like no other. I'm really proud of my committee as to how they approached last year's festival, because it would have been quite easy, I think, with the unknown trajectory of COVID, just to say, oh, we'll need to take another year out. But they didn't. They said, events are opening up, albeit in different ways. What can we do, and how can we do our best to do something to keep the festival alive, to bring work to artists and keep connected with audiences? So we started scenario planning. So this was just after we did the first lockdown. We were in the summer of 2020, and life was starting to open up a little bit. We knew that events outside were starting to happen. The online world was starting to develop. All of a sudden, I think arts organisations were realising it was their only option really to communicate. So we started looking at different scenarios, thinking what would be best for best interests of public health, but what would also allow artists to have work. And in the end, we ended up delivering a hybrid festival. So we had 3 days of a drive-in cinema at Scone Palace, which was something very different for us. It was completely out of our normal sphere of delivery, and that went on the whole very well. We had a number of different films and family films and had a good family audience. And then we decided to continue to programme a diverse and rich festival, but to move most of it online. So at this point, you couldn't go and see a live concert. So we figured that was the best and most realistic option, viable option. So we programmed concerts over the full 10 days, and we filmed in venues around Perth. So we had, just to highlight a few examples, we had Nicola Benedetti and the Scottish Chamber Orchestra in the concert hall. This was the Gesualdo Six Choir in Perth Museum and Art Gallery. And then we had Ross Ainsley, Ali Hutton, and a number of friends do a traditional concert in the Byre up at Inshira, and we also filmed the Scottish Ensemble there. We then hopped over to Perth Theatre Studio and had about 9 different artists we filmed there. So one of the things that we realised was that we had a really unique opportunity to promote Perth in a way that we had never been able to do it before to global audiences, because normally the festival attracts about 60% local audience, 35% other Scottish, and maybe 5% or under that would come from out with Scotland, whether England or internationally. But we thought this year, there's no limit really to where somebody could tune in from, and Perth has such a stunning range of cultural venues. We thought it was time, and a unique opportunity, we'll never do it again, really, to promote our venues and our artists in Scotland to a wider audience. So we did, and we were really, I think, quite amazed with the reach that it had. We have viewers from the USA, Canada, New Zealand, right across Europe, Vietnam, Singapore. I was analysing all the box office data, and it's quite incredible to see where people actually tuned in from. I genuinely have no idea how they heard about us. And it's funny, I think we had a lot of artists working with us and promoting to their networks, many of whom have international networks. So I think that must have been one of the ways that word spread. But it's certainly, a really nice opportunity to do something a bit special. So I'm just going to, looking at the gentleman up here, to see if is it possible to play the wee video for a moment. Thank you. This is just a very short, just a clip, a concert trailer, just to show you the type of artists and venues that we had last year. No, that's okay, do not worry, I will continue on. So I just had a little video to show you, but we'll just move on. So looking back now, it really feels like a distant memory, but I was proud of what we achieved under difficult circumstances. One thing that I would say is people assume that an online festival is a cheap option. I would say it's absolutely not a cheap option, because we have the same artist fees, the same venue hire, the same production costs, and then on top of that, you have the audio-visual costs, which are fairly expensive. And then on top of that, you cannot charge what you'd charge for a live ticket. So the only way we were able to deliver that, and I do make that clear to everyone really I speak to, is that we had government funding. We had some one-off pots of COVID funding that allowed us to, for example, move online and pay for the audio-visual costs. And without that support and the support of wonderful funders like the Gannachie Trust and others who were able to wrap around the model that we're delivering, and we really couldn't have done it. So we're very grateful. So what I wonder, gentlemen, just to say, if you have a moment to put the slides back on, that would be super. Thank you. So while that's happening, I'm just going to finish by telling you a little bit about the 50th Anniversary Festival this May. So our festival this year takes place for 12 days from Wednesday the 18th to Sunday the 29th of May. So there are big opening concerts on the Thursday, but we've topped and tailed it with a couple of fringe events. And we are aiming for a return to a fully live festival. So we have been planning on that basis. If we need to change direction, we'll do that if and when that happens, but I think all the indicators are that we should be in a position, hopefully in May, to deliver on a live basis. So we have our full range of genres, and I have a couple of photos just to highlight for you, but I'll just talk you through them. So we are opening with Scottish Opera with a gala night. We have, just in terms of some of our concert hall concerts, we obviously have Jools Holland coming along. He's doing a show with Eddie Reader as his special guest. We have Opera Bohemia, who are Scotland's touring opera company. They are coming to Perth Theatre to do a bespoke production for us of Madame Butterfly. So that's going to be really special. That's actually running for 2 nights in the theatre, and it's with a chamber orchestra as well, so really looking forward to that one. What else have we got in terms of big ones? We have Friends, the musical. So those of you who are Friends fans or may have children or grandchildren who are into the TV show Friends, we have Friends the musical, which is playing in Perth Theatre. We have a number of different artists coming along. We have Tommy Smith, the world-leading saxophonist. He's going to be performing in St Ninian's Cathedral, and quite differently for Tommy, he's doing a solo acoustic concert, where he is drawing melodies from a whole different range of genres: jazz, popular music, praise song, and what he does is he walks around he's been playing in churches around Scotland, and he walks around the venue and uses the echoes and the space, I guess, to produce the sound that he wants. So every concert's a bit different, and he plays with the acoustics of the venue. So if those of you know or have been to a concert in St Ninian's, it's quite a boomy space, so I'm quite excited to hear how that concert's going to sound. We also have Tenebrae Choir coming along to St John's Kirk. They have a new programme, Queen of Heaven, that they're performing. And then really to finish off the festival, So jumping around genres a bit here, but to finish off the festival, we have a new festival weekend. We're having in the RT Marquee, we're having 2 days of free live music, and it's going to be promoting up-and-coming emerging Scottish artists, so young people who are at earlier stages of their career. And again, we want to try and make that as accessible as possible, so we've got some Creative Scotland funding to help deliver that for free. So that's just a bit of a flavour into what's coming. One thing that we are doing is we have a festival exhibition that I'm currently curating with some help from others to bring together people's memories over the 50 years of the festival and give a bit of a timeline. So we're just finalising the details of that, but that will be running for most of the festival as a physical exhibition, and also we're doing a video online as well. So really people can learn and hear about the festival. So my one request is, if you're sitting here today and anything has jogged a memory thinking, oh, I was at that concert, or oh, I remember that lovely memory of the festival, if you do have any memories to share, I would love to hear from them, because we're collating them from artists, from people who were behind the scenes, but particularly as well from audience members. So please do share. It would be lovely to hear from you. I did have my contact details up on the screen, but I can give you a note of them. I'm not looking for War and Peace, just a couple of lines about your favourite festival memory to be included in the exhibition. It would be greatly appreciated. So I think that brings me to the end of my talk. What I was going to say is I do have, probably in early March, I will have our festival programmes available, so they're not quite printed yet. But if it would be okay, I'd be very pleased to drop in a box for members if you all wanted to take one and just have a wee look, and then you can explore at your leisure what might be happening at the festival. So thank you so much again. It was lovely to speak with you, and I think, yeah, look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David very kindly is going to skip around.
Hands up, any questions? No, I'm going to get. Oh, there we are.
Would there be a chance to hear you performing? Is it violin that you play?
Well, I'm a composer professionally, and an amateur performer, so I would stress that. So I play violin. I actually play with Anne in the symphony orchestra, and I play piano, but I'm not a professional performer, so I perform in nice groups of people like the symphony orchestra, but never solo. But so writing music is what I do.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So what about hearing one of your compositions then?
Well, if you yes, there is actually an opportunity. So I think provided everything goes ahead with COVID, the Symphony Orchestra in Perth is actually going to be premiering the work that I've just recorded with the RSNO on the 8th of May. So it's Sunday, the 8th of May at Perth Concert Hall. So that's been we did have it planned for early March, but that's just been rescheduled. So I think we're just about to start rehearsals again. We're starting this Wednesday. And then they should be performing that in May. So there is a wee opportunity if you'd like to come along and hear it. It's called the Rinse of Isla, and it's about that Scottish island of Isla, which is where my family were from, my grandparents and generations before that. So it's a bit of a musical tour around Isla.
Gosh. Oh.
Are you happy with the way that you're encouraging younger people to come? Are you selling the seats for the events you are putting on?
It's a very good question. I think so. It's one of our main aims as a festival in terms of an area we want to develop is a younger audience. I think a young audience at classical events is a challenge across the board. I think for classical concerts, what we do is we work. So this year we're working with children's classic concerts who bring classical music in a fun and engaging way to young people. So they're producing currently a bespoke concert for the festival, and we're looking for that to be in St John's Kirk. And again, that'll be targeting family audience. So we do that as a way of making sure that the productions are as relevant and engaging as they can for young people. And this year as well, Opera Bohemia they're very kindly going to be opening up their dress rehearsal of Madame Butterfly to schools. So I've been able to go around the schools, and music and drama students are coming along to watch for free. So yeah, we try and encourage, particularly around the classical side, young people to experience it and get a flavour for it. And I think with our wider genres, it depends very much on the artist that we programme. So we have to programme artists that are going to feel relevant to a young person. But we do try and, across all genres, we make free tickets available through the schools, through the instrumental services for young people to come along as well. So young musicians, again, to experience people like, we've got the BBC Big Band coming this year, so we'll provide tickets for young people to come along and experience them. But it's a continuing challenge, I would say, particularly across the classical music world, is just encouraging that attendance at concerts.
See any more hands?
I had one question, and that is that we've been to several of the Russian orchestras, and we've only ever seen one person in the orchestra smile. She had bright red hair and was giggling all the time, and we decided that she was probably a lunatic. Do they ever smile?
Not from my experience either. It's so funny you say that. I mean, I was saying about orchestras having their different character, and you'll see that if you're a frequenter at different concerts, you have your smiley orchestras who, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the John Wilson Orchestra was the one that blew my mind away, because they were just glowing and they were moving. There was so much, you could see them, it was like they were dancing, there was so much swaying, whereas the Russian orchestras are quite severe. Wonderful musicians, but quite severe. So you don't go along expecting to see a smile at the audience. It's quite funny.
Thank you. Now my pleasure to hand over to Sue Hendry to give a vote of thanks.
Thanks, Robert. As many of you will probably know, my husband was a founder member of the festival and stayed very involved with it until his death just over 7 years ago. And it's been great to hear Helen talking and bringing back so many memories. One I have of Malcolm Arnold is, in those days we had a festival service near, Sunday at the beginning of the festival, and David Thompson, who was the first chairman of the festival and then became president, treated the festival committee plus maybe a few musicians to Sunday lunch. And I always remember the year Malcolm Arnold was here, a glorious day out in the garden at David's house, and Malcolm Arnold falling asleep on a sun lounger. It was so funny. And things like Bryn Terfel, I remember, one of the big things he raved about was he got a round of golf at Glen Eagles with a couple, my husband, another committee member, and someone who was a member at St Andrews. So it was, that these memories are good. It's been a fascinating talk from Helen. She's put in a hell of a lot of work to going back over the history of the festival and putting it all together. And I hope you've all enjoyed it. And I hope there's great support for the festival this year. Thank you very much indeed, Helen.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you. Could I just put in another thank you? Thank you very much, chaps, on the technology. It's been an absolute nightmare for you again. And my gosh, I know they put in 2 hours working yesterday afternoon. And again, a lot of time this morning. Thank you very much, chaps. Our next meeting is on the 7th of March, when we have Meg Luckin's talking about 100 years of Scots in Russia. Maybe they found some that smiled. Anyway, that is on Monday, the 7th of March. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. Oh, don't forget the Tradecraft stand if you're feeling hungry. There's your chance.
I think actually it was a very good talk, actually. I found the sound of it difficult.
So did I, a little bit.